What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action. We have UFC 73 on deck this Saturday, featuring a 5-round women's strawweight main event between Mackenzie Dern and Angela Hill. This was upgraded from last week's card as a 3-round fight on the card. Now it's headlining this card, and it's 5 rounds. So I saw a lot of disgruntlement about the choice of main event for this one, but I mean, if you're going to showcase the women's strawweight division, take the best submission fighter in Mackenzie Dern and take one of the most experienced strikers and well-rounded fighters in Angela Hill. So I think it's a matchup that makes sense. It should be fun. There's 12 fights on this card altogether at UFC Vegas 73, and if you look at the names at first glance, it looks like a very low-level card. It kind of is, but the matchups, I think, were made pretty well. A lot of them make sense to me, and when I broke down the fights, I had very clear opinions of who I thought would win the large majority of these fights. So I'm probably going to have a bunch of moneyline bets on this card. I've already got several. I'll end up having action on probably at least half of these fights. Just from a pure moneyline perspective, I can see value on certain sides I'm strong on, and the props will probably sprinkle in the week as more books open up. But on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time this week, I'll be having my friends Tommy and Anthony from the On The Line podcast joining us to break down the fights again from a gambling perspective, and we'll have a lot more prop betting options as well. But one of the books that does have props out currently, the first one to usually do it for our sport, is betonline.ag. They're now a partner of my channel, Addicted to Combat, so if you use the link in the description, it'll take you to their page through my affiliate link, and if you're a new customer in need of a sports book, they'll give you a 50% welcome bonus as well. So easy way to help out the channel. As far as other ways to help out the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep the channel growing. And I got to thank all of you guys that showed up to the live Fight Companion stream this past Saturday. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys as the fights went on. We had a good 20 to 30 live viewers. The whole 6 hours the fights were going on. So I managed to squeak by some profit last week and the week before that. So hopefully we can ride into this week and make a third winning week in a row. But again, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into the first prelim of the night. Kicking off the card at welterweight, we have Takashi Sato versus Themba Gorimbo. This is a striker versus grappler matchup at its simplest form, with Takashi Sato being in the UFC a few fights now. He's riding a 3-fight losing streak as a Japanese southpaw striker primarily. Themba Gorimbo only making his second walk to the cage. We just saw him make his unsuccessful debut back in February against AJ Fletcher. And before that, Themba Gorimbo was fighting out of the South African promotion EFC, and he's a pretty well-known finisher with 6 submissions out of his 10 wins. But both guys can do a little bit of the opposite trade, right? Like Takashi Sato, we know, is a southpaw striker that jabs his way into range and just tries to line up that sniper of a left hand. But he's got a judo base to him, and if you watch his fights pre-UFC, he does get trip takedowns here and there. He can't get those judo throws going off the cage, but so far we generally don't see that in the UFC. Themba Gorimbo, on the other hand, he likes to strike at distance. He's got nice long kicks. He is 6'1", which is pretty big for this weight class, a few inches taller than Takashi Sato. But up close, he's far less technical with his striking, pretty hittable, and can get into sort of like a brawling pattern up close. But then he clinches up and tries to take the fight to the mat. Gorimbo does have pretty good takedowns. He even took down AJ Fletcher, who's a very well-rounded fighter, in round 1. But eventually Gorimbo slowed down a bit in round 2, and he got elbowed and basically clubbed and subbed by guillotine at that point. So Gorimbo coming back, and this is a pretty good matchup for him, right? Takashi Sato, like I said, mostly a striker, pretty low volume. He is powerful early, but his weakness is the grappling. He's been submitted, I believe, 3 times in total, and I think they were all in the UFC. So we're talking about Belal Muhammad back in the day. Might have been his debut, I believe. He was able to get the back of Takashi Sato, take him down a couple of times, and get the only submission, I believe, on Belal Muhammad's record is over Takashi Sato. Same thing with Miguel Baeza, who was a Brazilian prospect at the time. He basically got his first submission by arm triangle after taking down Takashi Sato and having a fairly competitive striking battle with him early. And we last saw in about a year ago, Gunnar Nelson, oddly enough, one of the better submission fighters. He wasn't able to submit Takashi Sato, but it's more because he was getting those takedowns towards the end of the round and just barely having enough time to work. But he got the back for, I want to say, close to 5 to 10 minutes out of that 15-round fight. So yeah, Takashi Sato, when he gets taken down, which is easily, he gives his back to get up, and he always exposes his neck. So I think Gorimbo can really expose that deficiency in Sato's game here. And I think it's a tailor-made matchup for him here, as long as he does not get sniped off by that left hand from Sato early. So I'm going to put the bet down on Themba Gorimbo. I got it at minus 107. Like I said, it's pretty much a pick 'em, so there's slight money on either side moving either direction. But yeah, you give the UFC experience, the power, probably even the cardio to Takashi Sato, because he doesn't expend very much energy, so he can last all 3 rounds. But you got to give the grappling, the size, and the striking output, technical or not, to Themba Gorimbo. So he could win a decision, but I think he does get that submission in this spot. Women's flyweight bout up next between Victoria Leonardo and Natalia Silva, and this is the biggest betting favorite on the card. The new prospect from Brazil, making her 3rd walk to the cage at 26 years old. Natalia Silva is a minus 1,000 favorite over Leonardo, who we've seen 3 times in the UFC now, going 1-2. Winning her last bout against the great Mandy Bohm by decision. Leonardo is the plus 700 underdog. So pretty massive money line there. Even when I saw this at minus 500 to minus 600, minus 700, I thought that was ridiculous for Natalia Silva. Like, it makes sense, but there's no way to play it. And I'm surprised it's all the way up at minus 1,000. Pretty crazy there. So they're about the same size. I think Leonardo will have a little bit of size on her, the shorter, stouter fighter, but she will be an inch taller than Natalia Silva at 5'4". Silva's got more pro experience at 14 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, but it's Leonardo with the more high-level experience, but she's lost all of those high-level bouts. Miranda Maverick a couple of times in Invicta, a knockout loss by head kick to Erin Blanchfield, and then coming into the UFC on short notice, she took on Manon Fiorot, who pretty much pieced her up as the much better striker and got that standing TKO stoppage. Melissa Gatto, who's a very well-rounded but a very good striker as well, was able to piece her up for 2 rounds before Leonardo's arm re-broke and the doctor stopped the fight. So aside from that, we're looking at Chelsea Hackett on the Contender Series. She beat Hackett, who's not a very good fighter, but even Hackett had her in all sorts of trouble in round 1 because Leonardo's not very defensively responsible in the striking. She's got the wrestling offense, and she's got the clinch stalling on the cage. That's about what she has. So she's durable. I'll give her that. 33 years old she is. She's seen a lot of different types of opponents. She's durable. And that's the way that I would see this being like a parlay buster if it happened, would be Natalia Silva piecing her up in round 1, emptying the gas tank, trying to finish her, and then Leonardo is still there and can get control time with the wrestling in rounds 2 and rounds 3. I think that's a very unlikely outcome, but at minus 1,000, you can start considering those possibilities. So not a whole lot of value there. You're talking about a 91% implied probability at minus 1,000. There's no way to really glean a reasonable edge over the market at that point. So you could look to the props. I'd probably look the under because it's not far off from what they're going to price Natalia Silva inside the distance. But that's how I think this is going to play out. Natalia Silva getting some sort of standing TKO stoppage, just with rapid-fire strikes unanswered. Probably in like round 2 at the earliest, maybe round 3. But I don't think it's going to take more than 7 to 8 minutes to get Leonardo out of here. So just again, boxing is solid for Silva. The low calf kicks are going to limit the mobility, whatever mobility Leonardo has. And Silva even has the offensive BJJ from her back with a lot of arm bars on her record. If she does get taken down, we saw in her last fight against Teresa Bleda, she got taken down by a really good grappler there, but she was able to reverse positions, stay safe from any of the submission attempts that Bleda sent her way, and she kicked her in the face in round 3 and ended the fight. So I like what I see from Silva. I'm just pointing out a lot of ways that this could go wrong. If she has a bad night, if she gets injured, that minus 1,000 isn't looking so valuable anymore. So probably going to stay off of this from a betting perspective, but Silva should get that round 2 TKO stoppage. Lightweight bout up next between 2 grapplers in Chase Hooper and Nick Fiore. And we've seen Chase Hooper quite a bit in the UFC, even though he's only 23 years old. He's at a 3-3 record at featherweight. He now moves up to lightweight for this bout after getting pieced up and the crap beaten out of him by Steve Garcia. I think Garcia dropped him about 4 times within like a minute earlier this year or late last year. I can't remember. I think it was maybe October of last year that it happened. So Chase Hooper, of course, a grappler, BJJ player primarily. He's got these long striking weapons since he was a 6'1", featherweight and now a lightweight. He's still long, but some simple 1-2s, not the best hand speed, some kicks to maintain distance. He really just wants to clinch up and then dive on a limb and take you to the mat. So his wrestling is not very strong defensively or offensively. His striking defense not very good. So he's really just BJJ or bust. And he's able to threaten with things like heel hooks and just diving on people's legs to make them freak out that, he's grabbing their legs and straightening it out. And then they give up their back and he can climb all over you. Luckily, somebody with Nick Fiore's credentials, he's the BJJ coach at the New England Cartel team with some bigger featherweights like Calvin Cater, Rob Font, and he's got a Henzo Gracie black belt from New Hampshire. This guy, he shows very good offensive wrestling I've seen. He shows very good defensive wrestling, and the durability we saw in his debut on short notice against Mateusz Rebecki, who's rarely taking people to the scorecards, usually finishing them inside the distance, either by submission or by knockout. But Nick Fiore was able to go to his first decision result in a loss, but it was a one where he did show resolve and toughness in that spot, even landing some takedowns on Rebecki as he tired in rounds 2 and rounds 3. So I see some technical striking from Nick Fiore, although it's not the best defensively. It's not the best striking output either, but he does seem comfortable there, and he does have, like I said, the takedown offense, cuts the angles very well in his double leg takedown. He can probably dictate where this fight takes place. So whether it's at striking range or if these two want to test each other on the mat, I think Fiore's going to be very well versed in some of those submission tricks that have fooled other people to give up their backs. Like I said, those leg locks and pesky things like that. I think Fiore is going to find a way to counter that and end up in a dominant position for the majority of this fight, wherever it should play out. So, like I said, both guys, pretty young for the weight class. Both guys are, fairly inexperienced. I'll give the experience edge to Chase Hooper. He's seen a lot more, but he has lost to a lot of the more UFC caliber people at this point. Guys like Steven Peterson, guys like, before he retired, guys like Alex Caceres beat him in his debut. So, and even Steve Garcia, like he can't hang with this level of competition, but he can beat guys that are no longer on the roster. So I'm going to take Nick Fiore just the pure sake that he has some upside to him with his skill set here, and I think he'll dictate where this plays out. So at minus 105, I put 1.05 units to win one. So not a big investment. I'm not totally confident in this guy yet, but just based on their last losses, I liked what I saw out of a loss from Fiore more than I like out of a loss from Chase Hooper. So the money line has since flipped. We're looking at minus 130 for Fiore, and Chase Hooper is plus 110. So money is coming in on Nick Fiore. The betting market sees that he might be the better side here. So if it keeps going in his favor, I probably wouldn't play this too heavily at all, but I like probably the overs in this match. I think Fiore could win a decision here. We've got another grappler versus grappler matchup next at heavyweight between Ilir Latifi and Rodrigo Nascimento. A pretty easy fight to break down, honestly. These guys do have some commonalities, right? Like I said, both grapplers. For Ilir Latifi, it's more of that submission wrestling style that he was a champion in Sweden pre-UFC. But back then he was a light heavyweight, and he even started his career in the UFC at that weight class. Now he's a blown up 5'10" heavyweight and 40 years old with very limited striking weapons, very stiff and robotic. They're just, sticking out a jab, maybe a big looping right hook or overhand, and doesn't get his head off the center line very well. And he's super low output, so looking for an opportunity to get the fight to the mat where he then just lays and prays. He just literally lays on you, chest-to-chest pressure, maybe does just enough soft striking from the top position or advancing to get the ref not to stand it up. He just wants that control time at this point, and his cardio is not that great. So, oddly enough, though, nobody has ever taken him down, but that's because over 15 fights, most of the time people assume they can outstrike Ilir Latifi, and many of them have knocked him out or outstruck him on the numbers, stick and move on him. Ilir Latifi, they just feel no need to go into his wheelhouse, which is the wrestling. And that's common for the heavier divisions. But same with Rodrigo Nascimento. Nobody's taken him down yet, but it is only 4 fights. He's gone 3-1 in those at this point. He had a no contest over Alain Baudot by round 1 knockout, but that was for Ritalin, and they actually gave that win back to him after he got his prescription therapeutic use exemption for that. So it was for Ritalin. It was for like an ADHD, stimulant. So whether he was using that to gain an edge, that is still against the rules, whether you have a prescription or not. That's been banned in the Olympics since like the 70s. So whatever, it's probably not a big edge, but they did give him that win over Alain Baudot back. So he is, I think, technically like 10-1 or 9-1 at this point. 30 years old. He's 10 years younger than Ilir Latifi, a lot less fight miles, and He's a BJJ grappler through and through with 6 submissions out of his 9 wins. But, like I said, against Alain Baudot, he did show he's got some power in his hands. Not the best striker, but if he can lead the dance and really get you backing up, he could probably have success striking against Ilir Latifi. So if this stayed striking, Ilir Latifi never lands more than 10 to 20 significant strikes in the fight, really. So I think Nascimento could win a stand-up battle here, but he also will probably find a way to get this fight to the mat, especially after round 1 when Ilir Latifi tires. I think the takedowns on him will actually be plausible here. I think he will get taken down for the first time in his career, and it might be the last time as well. I don't think there's many years left for Ilir Latifi. He's been flirting with the idea of retiring anyways. He mentioned that after his last fight over Alexei Oleinik, who he narrowly beat through just, like I said, laying and praying on top of him. I think Ilir Latifi admitted in the post-fight presser that he had staph infection like a week or 2 before the fight. So the commission didn't take too kindly for that, and I think they threatened him with some suspension, and I think he threatened with retirement. So he's back here, probably has no aspirations of fighting that much more, so I don't expect much of an effort. Minus 180 is the price I paid on Nascimento. He's not the best fighter going, but I think it's an easy win over Ilir Latifi here. So 1.8 units to win 1 on Rodrigo Nascimento, the much younger man, the guy who's got more striking output, and probably at least a lot longer of a future in this division at this point. That's who I'm taking to win this fight. Up next at welterweight, we've got a battle between 2 wrestlers turned MMA fighters, and that's a common theme for this card, I'm starting to realize. But Orion Koski taking on Gilbert Urbina at 170. 2 guys who have had their names in the UFC roster for a while, but we still don't know all that much about since they fight so infrequently. We've got Orion Koski fighting pretty much a year between each of his appearances after his Contender Series win in 2020 with his brother Louis Koski. But Orion Koski seems to have a little bit better cardio, able to have some late finishes in his career, a couple of round 3, I think, ground and pound stoppages as a pro. He's 8-1 as a professional, taking his only loss by knockout in round 2 against Philip Rowe in his debut, and he came back a year later last summer against Blood Diamond, the kickboxing friend of Israel Adesanya, and that should have been a clear walkover spot for any MMA fighter that's well-rounded, kind of like Jeremiah Wells did to Blood Diamond. But Orion Koski went all 3 rounds and actually had a competitive bout with him a little bit. Clearly winning the fight with his control time and his wrestling, but anytime it stayed at striking distance, he was getting pieced up and looked very stiff and uncomfortable against Mike Mathitha. So we're looking at another 10-month layoff now from Orion Koski. I think he had some maybe 1 or 2 canceled bouts due to injury from his side, but he's powerful, he's durable. Even though he got knocked out by Phil Rowe, he ate a lot of punishment before succumbing to that sniper right hand of the long reach of Phil Rowe. Orion Koski, he's got some good techniques as well to get the takedowns. He does have some slams, some suplexes, and that expends a lot of energy. It's usually better when he uses that whizzer kick throw. That uchimata is what they call it in judo, but in wrestling, I think it's more of like a whizzer kick. He'll use that when people get off balance on the cage. But yeah, sometimes he does just muscle people around to get them there, and he can gas himself out as the fight goes. So Gilbert Urbina could capitalize on that, and this is a guy who we saw become technically runner-up on short notice for the Ultimate Fighter in 2021, which was the last time we saw him fight, almost 2 years ago. He took on Brian Battle, had early success in round 1, I believe, against Brian Battle, with some good striking and some good wrestling offense. But then he kind of gassed himself out on short notice, and Brian Battle was able to get the rear naked choke on him. But Urbina is still 27 years old, and he's really carrying the weight of his family here because he is the 3rd and the youngest Urbina brother to be in the UFC octagon. His brother Hector Urbina, I think, went 1-3 in the UFC. Not very impressive between somewhere around that 2015 to 17 period before being cut. And then his brother Eli Urbina was on the Contender Series unsuccessfully and the Ultimate Fighter unsuccessfully. So Urbina is the guy who's kind of carrying the rest of the weight of the legacy here. He is 6'3", very big for the weight class, and I like his wrestling. His skill set's very well rounded. His striking defensively is a little bit reckless at times, but it's effective. It's got good point scoring ability, good minute winning ability. And he's very good at mixing in the striking and then diving into the takedown offense. And even, grabbing the neck of his opponents from different angles that they don't see coming. For a big guy like him, he gets the hooks in very quickly. He's very got good dexterity with his legs, getting the body triangles slapped in, and he's always chasing the submission. So I like that about him here. And he's got a good tie clinch as well, which will be pretty effective against the shorter man in Orion Koski. So I'm going to take Gilbert Urbina. I was shocked that he was the underdog in this spot. Money has come in on him. He's plus 125 at this point. The underdog, Orion Koski, the minus 150 favorite. And I just don't see it, other than people not knowing who Urbina is, maybe not watching his his professional tape before this, but he's got a very good skill set, and I think he's got the wrestling to hang with Orion Koski. He can probably dictate where this fight plays out, and with his long striking weapons, I think he's got the cardio and the minute-winning ability to, expose the striking deficiencies of Orion Koski, who's a little bit stiff and more of like that wrestle boxer non-fluidity to his movement. So give me Urbina. I think he does get this fight to the mat, and in the later parts of the fight, I think he gets around 2 or 3 rear naked choke. Women's strawweight bout up next between Vanessa Demopoulos and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. This is a grappler versus striker matchup at 115, with Demopoulos being the newly crowned BJJ black belt. That's pretty recent, I believe. And Karolina Kowalkiewicz, of course, she's been in the league for a long time. A Muay Thai striker is the way she does most of her best work. She's actually 7-7 in the UFC at this point. So that's a lot of UFC fights, 14 over the years. I think she was a KSW champion before coming here. And as such, she got treated pretty well and got thrown in against very good competition, including a title shot against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That was when Joanna was at her best, so I think she got outstruck by like 4-1 by Kowalkiewicz at that point, like everybody was getting at that time. Kowalkiewicz, I think the level of competition never dropped after that. You get a title shot and they expect that you're going to hang with the best of them at 115. And, at a certain point, she started going win-loss, and then a 5-fight losing streak that she just now overcame recently by beating Felice Herrig in her retirement fight and by beating Silvana Gomez-Juarez last time out. And the odd part is that Karolina Kowalkiewicz used her wrestling and grappling to win both of those bouts. So maybe a little bit, changing of the game plan, or maybe those people were just low enough level of competition she was able to try something new. But I don't think she wants to kind of dabble in that realm with Vanessa Demopoulos, who's got very good BJJ. She can wrap up arm bars very quickly, and she does have 4 submissions out of her 9 wins. Demopoulos is somebody who did face Silvana Gomez-Juarez as well. That's an opponent they share in common. And it only took less than a round for Demopoulos to get knocked down by Gomez-Juarez early and then wrap up the armbar from guard and tap her out. So coming off of a very impressive performance against Maria Oliveira, Demopoulos is showing that even at 34 years old, she's getting a little bit more smooth with her striking. She's always been very scrappy and aggressive and had some power in her strikes, but they're becoming a little bit better with combination, a little bit more accurate, faster to close the distance, and she still can mix in her wrestling offense. She's got some good takedowns, and of course, the ability to wrap up limbs and get the tap. So all things considered here, she's 3-1 in the UFC on a 3-fight winning streak. I'm going to take her to win this fight. She's a plus 120 underdog. Kowalkiewicz, the minus 140 favorite, and that just seems a little odd to me just because I know that she's got the experience advantage here and, of course, a big striking advantage, but, her better days are certainly behind her at 37 years old and all of these fight miles in the UFC. Kowalkiewicz, she did have that 5-fight losing streak against a lot of tough girls, right, like Andrade, Waterson, Grasso, Yan Xiaonan, but she also got armbarred by Jessica Penne. But what I'm saying is that all happened right when she got diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease, which is a thyroid condition, so I'm sure her weight cuts are a little bit more labored at this age anyways, but then that doesn't help with the disease. And Demopoulos, I still think she's young enough in the sport to make some improvements here, and her aggression and scrappiness goes a long way. She's always walking through her opponent's punishment just to land strikes of her own and get the fight into the clinch and to the mat. So I'll say either a round 1 submission or she grinds out a decision win, just doing the better work on the feet in moments and then mixing in the grappling as well. So it's going to have to be a well-rounded game plan from Demopoulos if she doesn't end the fight early, but I'll take her to win the fight. Lightweight bout up next between 2 strikers in Ayaser Maheshate and Vyacheslav Borschev. We've got both of these guys came through the Contender Series with impressive victories Maheshate's was impressive because he had to weather the early storm as a plus 600 underdog and come back to win that fight by decision in rounds 2 and rounds 3. Very massive Chinese prospect at 6 foot tall for the weight class. Only 23 years old at this point, and he came in his debut against Steve Garcia and sniped him off in 1 minute out cold with a nice right cross. So that was an impressive way to kick off his career, but then he just got out-wrestled and beaten up over 3 rounds against Steve Garcia. So Vyacheslav Borschev, kind of a similar situation. He had a nice check left hook knockout blow over Chris Duncan on the Contender Series, who's hittable but, decently durable, so that was impressive. And Borschev then came into the UFC, nice body shot TKO over Dakota Bush, but now he's also been out-wrestled by both Mike Davis and Mark Diakese. No answer for their 11 and 8 takedowns against him, respectively. So training at Team Alpha Male, probably not a bad spot to be, and keep on working that get-up game. He does have the butterfly guard, the butterfly hooks as a way to, get back to his feet and push off and try to make space, but it's not good enough against a higher level of competition. He's just going to have to stop those takedowns before they even get executed. So as far as his striking goes, much more comprehensive than that of Maheshate, in my opinion. Borschev is 31 years old, so he's seen a lot more over his long kickboxing career. Couple hundred or so kickboxing matches at the highest level since he was like 14. So the Russian is going to have a clear advantage as far as like his striking weapons. His toolbox is full of body shots, spinning attacks, and he makes those nice stance switches and in-fight reads. He can counter-strike or be offensive and aggressive. So I think Maheshate, even though he's the longer fighter, he never maintains distance. He likes to be the aggressor with nice step-in knees, big long 1-2s, and some front kicks as well. But I think Borschev is going to be able to use that lateral movement, snipe him off all day with better head movement and better reads. So give me Vyacheslav Borschev here. I paid minus 150 on his money line, a couple units on him, and he's moved up to about a minus 170 favorite at this point. You can get Maheshate at plus 145, but aside from him being the bigger man slightly, the younger man to make potentially more improvements more rapidly, I just don't see a whole lot from Maheshate that I like here. I think Borschev, if this stays a striker versus striker matchup, he should be the more equipped fighter here. So give me Borschev to score either a round 1 or round 2 TKO stoppage. Another lightweight bout up next between Michael Johnson and Carlos Diego de Ferreira. Very fun matchup here, and this is one of the closer fights to call on the card, in my opinion. I went back and forth with this pick, and it's still kind of hazy to me. But Michael Johnson is somebody we've known for a long time in the UFC. I think he's had like 27 fights. Certainly one of these guys that falls in the archetype of came into the UFC a wrestler, and he's remained as sort of a headhunter, kind of a knockout artist at 155. But it's made him sort of hesitant at times to really commit. He'll have early success, and quite frankly, his record would be a lot better if fights were only 1 round in the UFC, because he usually drops the ball after having early success. But he came off the Ultimate Fighter back when it was GSP versus Josh Koscheck in 2010. So it's been a long ride for him, and he's beaten guys like Joe Lozon, Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, Edson Barbosa, Melvin Guillard, like all of these guys that were in their prime at the time that he fought them and beat them. But he's also lost a lot of fights that he should have won as well. So, one of the archetypes of fighters that he loses to are submission specialists, and that's what Carlos Diego de Ferreira certainly is. But Michael Johnson is 36 at this point, probably the better days behind him, and 38 years old for the Brazilian submission, third-degree black belt. Diego de Ferreira, 38 years old. His best days are certainly behind him as well. And we haven't seen Diego Ferreira in a year and a half now, since the end of 2021. He's been riddled with injuries, and he's been backing out of a lot of fights around this 3-fight losing streak he's been on. So probably a little bit grizzled at this point. He is a 17-5 professional, and his last 3 losses have been against good competition. More of I think a submission to body strikes. I think it was like a big knee to the body and some ground and pound from Mateusz Gamrot last time we saw him. Before that, it was a loss to a round 2 loss to Gregor Gillespie after he almost beat Gillespie in round 1. And before that, a close decision loss to Beneil Dariush, who could match his grappling and probably implement better wrestling as well. So that's a typical thing for Diego Ferreira. what he lacks in his offensive wrestling to get the fight to his realm with the BJJ, he makes up for that in his very aggressive and accurate, effective striking. He's a powerhouse in the feet. He also has 3 knockouts as well as he has 7 submissions. So he can have big moments in the feet. He can gain people's respect there and bully them against the cage and look for the takedown. But he hasn't really gotten the fight to the mat on his terms in a while. So Michael Johnson, I don't think he's going to be one to implement a takedown heavy game plan here, and he's a guy who still has maintained pretty good takedown defense himself. But again, I think Michael Johnson's going to have that early success. He can probably counter Diego Ferreira if Ferreira is as aggressive as he normally is, catch him with like a big hook and sit him down. But Michael Johnson, he tends to have that bad fight IQ pattern where he knocks somebody down and he goes into their guard and tries to wrestle them instead of finishing the fight. So that could happen. That could extend this fight, and then it's anybody's game from there. I just feel like if I put money on Michael Johnson, even at plus money where he's at, he's just going to let me down, which he's done time and time again. So whether he's fighting Justin Gaethje back in the day, whether he's fighting Darren Elkins, whether he's fighting Thiago Moises even more recently, all of these guys, even what's another recent fight he had? Jamie Malarkey. He knocks him down early. It looks like he's going to have a fast start and an easy day in the office. Then he gets knocked down a second later and then loses a split decision. So he's always starting very strong and then dropping the ball in rounds 2 or rounds 3. So I can't trust him here. I will pick him to win the fight, though. I just think that at this point, he probably still has a future in the division, a little bit more so than Diego de Ferreira, who, like I said, the injuries are sketching me out. The long layoff sketches me out. And, I'll pick him to win this fight. I think he's going to get a round 1 knockout over Diego Ferreira, but, he would really have to work to get a decision in this fight because Diego Ferreira does not go anywhere. He's relentless, and Michael Johnson makes all types of mistakes as the fight goes on. So I'd be hoping for a round 1 knockout from Johnson in this spot, but he might have to edge out a greasy decision. Welterweight bout up next between Joaquin Buckley and Andre Fialho. This should be a very fun striker's delight. Both guys are finishers. Both guys coming off of a 2-fight losing streak, trying to right that wrong this Saturday. And this will be the first time we see Joaquin Buckley at 170 in the UFC. The last time we saw him at this weight class was in Bellator 5 years ago against Logan Storley, where he got out-wrestled and beaten by decision against the talented wrestler. So Joaquin Buckley is a very talented southpaw, explosive power striker, very creative with his combinations, and I feel like he is maturing as a striker and as a fighter in his time in the UFC so far. He's more of a patient fighter as far as throwing in combination, just for minute-winning sake, and less of that headhunter that he has been in the past. But he has faltered a few times. He's been knocked out 4 times in his career, and I think 3 of those were in the UFC. Same with Andre Fialho, though. He's been knocked out 4 times as well, and against much lesser competition. For Joaquin Buckley, his 2-fight losing streak recently has been against Chris Curtis. After early success, Chris Curtis was able to counter him in round 2 and knock him out. And then before that, Nasruddin Imavov able to beat him over 3 rounds. So respectable losses there for Buckley, who's frankly always been small for that weight class. Andre Fialho, he's coming off of back-to-back losses against Muslim Salikov, who's very long in the tooth and able to outstrike him over 3 rounds and finish him by standing TKO stoppage, wheel kicks, and pretty much hit him with everything but the kitchen sink there. And then before that, Jake Matthews knocked him out pretty viciously, I think in round 2 as well. So both of those 2 people, Jake Matthews, that was his first knockout in the UFC. Muslim Salikov, that was his first knockout in years. So not a good look for Fialho, who honestly, he's been fighting everywhere there's high-level fights and having mixed success. Only 29 years old for this guy, but he's fought in UAE Warriors, Bellator, LFA, PFL, all before coming to the UFC. So he's seen a lot, but he's lost to all of the higher-level competition. And he's very round 1 or bust, honestly. Like, he's 12 knockouts out of his 13 wins are all in round 1. And after that, he's kind of just like a lumbering, walking heavy bag who's somewhat durable. He never really goes down all the way. Like, even that Muslim Salikov loss was a standing TKO mercy referee stoppage. But, Fialho, he just really is low output, and I think his cardio is a lot worse than Buckley's at this weight class. So I'm going to go with Buckley to get the job done here. I think he does it by round 2 knockout, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets maybe in a hairy situation. Maybe he starts tiring out. And then I think Buckley's wrestling will actually be a tool for him. I think he can land takedowns. Not something you see super often from Buckley, and I wish you would see it more, but I think as a tool in this spot over Fialho, who's more of just a straight-up boxer. I think Buckley's the much better kickboxer and full, well-rounded mixed martial artist. So where the money line is at now, minus 220 for Buckley. I paid that price to win 1 unit in return. Fight ends in knockout might not be a bad look for this one, but both guys may respect each other's power early in this fight. It could get drug out late, and I think Buckley could win this by decision. But I'm going to predict a round 2 knockout for Buckley. I think he will catch Fialho slipping, and hopefully this new weight class is successful for Buckley here. But my only play on this is that money line of Buckley. Fight not going to decision. I might just pick your favorite fighter. Like if you're on Fialho, that round 1 knockout is usually his best bet. For Buckley, it could be at any round in the fight, so just playing him by finish would be your best bet there. But I'll talk more about the props when they open up on more books on Wednesday on the live stream. But right now, I just have that 2.2 unit stab on Buckley's money line. We've got a catch weight at 120 up next between 2 strawweights, Emily Ducote and Lupita Godinez. Both women are former Invicta strawweight champions, and Emily Ducote is making her 3rd walk to the cage. Both fighters are 29 years old here, so Godinez making a short notice appearance, and as such, we get that extra 5 pounds on this bout at 120. But Ducote coming in for her 3rd fight here after going 1-1 in her first 2 fights in the UFC last year. She beat on short notice Jessica Penne, who was a pretty old, I think 39-year-old submission fighter. So Ducote was skilled enough to stop her takedown offense, injure Penne's legs early, and then outpoint her comfortably over 3 rounds. Very impressive debut there. But then she had to take Penne's teammate Angela Hill on later in the year, and that's a massive step up in competition for your 2nd fight. And Angela Hill gave her a vet lesson, able to be the slicker, more fast striker, counter her appropriately, and shut down all of her offense in round 1. So that mentally shut down Ducote, it seemed like, who could not make those adjustments and lost that 3-round decision pretty handedly. So Ducote has struggled in the past against a grappling-heavy approach. Limalai McFarlane has submitted her before and able to ground her in both of their fights and beat her by submission in the 2nd fight and decision in the 1st fight. And also UFC fighter Kanako Murata, who's a wrestler, an Asian wrestler, able to ground her in all 3 rounds and win that close decision. So Ducote has struggled against those opponents, but otherwise she's very well-rounded. She can offensively wrestle against a certain level of competition herself. She's a good pressure forward striker, decently high output, good cardio, and she does have some knockout power, including one of the best women's knockouts I've ever seen against Danielle Taylor 2 years ago. So, she lost badly to Angela Hill. That kind of showed me where her ceiling is at, but she's still 29 years old, still pretty new to the UFC. I just think she's going to hang out around that middle of the road, sort of unranked level of competition. I think she's well-rounded enough to, beat the one-dimensional mediocre fighters. But Lupita Godinez is pretty well-rounded herself. Although she has that wrestling base, averages 4 takedowns per 15 minutes out of her 7 UFC fights so far. She's got pretty powerful striking as well, and she leaned on that in her last couple of fights, unsuccessfully against Angela Hill, who was able to, kind of make her timid to grapple or unwilling to grapple in that fight, and she lost as a big favorite. But in her last fight against Cynthia Calvillo, a fellow wrestler, she proved that she's able to win a fight over 15 minutes decisively. That's not based on her constant, takedown threat, throws, and things like that. Things that expend a lot of energy, but is what she's leaned on in the past. She's able to still go out there and actually be improved in the striking to beat somebody with the experience of Cynthia Calvillo. So that was impressive to me in that sense, even though Calvillo has not looked like herself. Godinez, I think, should win the fight here. She's the rightful favorite, in my opinion. I paid 1.45 units on her at minus 145. She's still around that price tag, and Ducote is about the plus 130 underdog here. So, again, I'm just not anticipating a big ceiling for Ducote. My opinion of her definitely changed after that Angela Hill bout, but still, I think she could be a formidable threat since there aren't a lot of well-rounded fighters in the UFC here at this weight class. Godinez has to mind her P's and Q's if she takes down Ducote. She does have that submission potential, but Godinez, I think, should stay safe here and win this fight. I'm going to call it by decision the way that Godinez usually does, but the money line is good enough. Sometimes you want to chop down these women's money lines with their decision prop, but it's not going to be that much different than her minus 145 money line. So give me Godinez by decision. Up next at middleweight, we've got our co-main event of the fight card. Once again, a striker versus grappler type of matchup here with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, the grappler, taking on Edmund Shahbazyan, the powerful striker, and once formerly a pretty hot prospect, cruising through round one knockout after round one knockout until eventually he met his match with a lot of grappling threats. Derek Brunson was able to best him, round 3 TKO stoppage. Jack Hermanson able to beat him by decision, grounded him, struck him on the mat, gassed him out. And then after that, Nasruddin Imavov at the end of 2021, able to crucifix him in round 2, get him to the mat, and once again, finish him inside the distance. So Edmund Shahbazyan, after getting 10 round 1 finishes, 9 of them being knockouts, most of them in round 1, when he gets extended, he's not only losing the fight, but he's losing it by stoppage a lot of the time. So Anthony Fluffy Hernandez on the other end of the spectrum, this guy's been rounding out his game pretty well. He's got that BJJ black belt he just earned earlier this year. A good wrestling game to back that up, scoring over 6 takedowns per 15 minutes over 6 UFC fights. And he's got aggressive striking as well, which is coming a long way at being more effective. He's coming off of a win over Marc-Andre Barriault last September. Very decisive win, scoring the takedowns, scoring points in the feet, and winning that quite easily after, I think, injuring Marc-Andre's ribs early in that fight. Shahbazyan, he did come back in December and right some of those wrongs, got himself on the winning track against Dalchalungiambula in round 2 by knockout, which, again, it's Dalchalungiambula, so it's kind of a custom-made matchup, a guy who also gasses out pretty early in the fight if he can't win early. So Shahbazyan, only 25 years old, he can still make improvements, but so far the dynamic has been when Fluffy Hernandez goes up in competition, he's able to, almost improve and rise to that occasion and make it look pretty easy. Whereas Shahbazyan rises up in competition and he falls and looks pretty bad and gets finished. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. The striking still goes in the favor of Shahbazyan, especially in round 1. The power in his favor with all the knockouts. And he's got some slight youth advantage here. Being 4 years younger, he can still probably make more rapid improvements technically. But you got to give the wrestling, the cardio, and the BJJ all to Fluffy Hernandez, as well as just the general momentum, I'd say, at this point as well. The guy is kind of fearless at this point. He's not tasted much adversity, except for a couple of spots where he got knocked out. Marcus Perez was able to club and sub him. That was also started with a body strike. And same with Kevin Holland. That was also a body strike that finished that as well. So it's not like he's chinny. It's just that he got a few bad breaks there with knees to the body. So he's got to tighten up that defense, especially in round 1. I think Shahbazyan is very, very live in round 1, but after that round 1 mark is up, I think it's all Hernandez in rounds 2 and 3. And I think he gets a submission at some point in that fight. So right now, the money line has come down a bit. It was like minus 285 to minus 300 for Hernandez over the weekend, which I kind of agreed with that number, to be honest with you. This is a horrible matchup for Shahbazyan, who does not need anybody to be as active and as much of a pressure fighter, especially pressuring the grappling side of things towards Shahbazyan, who gasses out and can't get up off of his back. So double whammy there for Shahbazyan. I think he gets beat pretty easily in most worlds here. It's moved down to minus 240 on the money line for Fluffy Hernandez, so I put 2.4 units on that to win one of the many money lines I have on this card at this point. So pretty confident in this one. Might even look at the submission props in those later rounds for Hernandez. Okay, we made it all the way to the main event of the Fight Night card. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. Let's break into this main event. Potentially 5 rounds of strawweight action between Mackenzie Dern, the submission specialist, and Angela Hill, the very well-experienced striker in this matchup. So at women's 115, Angela Hill has been in the cage longer than anybody else at the weight class, had more bouts than anybody else, and she's gone pretty consistently 50-50 in a lot of these spots, going 15 wins, 12 losses in her career. Even in decision results, she's 10-10 at this point, many of them very, very close and competitive. And at 38 years old, I don't think that's really going to change here. She's not a very dangerous finisher with her strikes, and she has a pretty good takedown defense rating, so she just wants to avoid the tussling on the ground, avoid the submission threat, and keep this at bay. And she circles very well. She's got good lateral movement, usually gets right back out to center. good kicks to maintain distance, and very technical striking. She's coming off of beating a young prospect, Emily Ducote, who we spoke about earlier. Tripled her up on significant strikes over 3 rounds very recently, so I'm not worried about Angela Hill's cardio, her technique, or her gassing out in this fight. She's been in 5-round spots before and done quite well. Like I said, one of the most experienced fighters you'll ever see. So this is a good step up for Mackenzie Dern, who just came off of a 5-round headliner loss against Yan Nan, a very similar type of matchup, striker versus grappler, for the 30-year-old Mackenzie Dern, who's world-level, BJJ specialist, pre-mixed martial arts career. Now she's 12-3 as a pro, 7 submissions, and 6 of those 7 were in round 1. So when she does get the subs, it's usually early. Otherwise, she's had a headlining bout against Marina Rodriguez, a good striker who beat her. She couldn't control or threaten submissions long enough to get the submission or to control the round over 5 rounds. Same thing happened last October with Yan Nan. So I think the same thing is going to happen in the favor of Angela Hill here. I think Angela Hill can keep this in the feet for the majority of 5 rounds. I think it would have been a lot closer in a 3-round fight, And I was going to bet the split decision very heavy in that 3-round fight because 3 rounds is kind of murky to see who won the fight. 5 rounds, you kind of get a clear sense of who's winning most of the exchanges over 25 minutes, just a bigger sample size to choose from. But I'll still probably play the fight goes to split in this just because Angela Hill has so many split decisions, and it is a coin toss by nature when she goes to the scorecards. She is 10-10 in decisions, and at this point, she's the underdog pretty moderately, right? Plus 150 to plus 160 for Angela Hill. A fight that I see, striker versus grappler, pretty binary, 50-50. I got to go with the plus money on this one. I'm not going to bet this fight because I'm just not in the business of betting 38-year-old, women's strawweights here who fight so close to the level of their competition. But, I'm going to go with Angela Hill as a pick to win by decision, win the majority of the rounds, at least 3 decisive rounds go in her favor. But I probably will have that bet, and I'm hoping I still get like plus 450 for this fight just to end in split, and I'll probably put like a 1/10 of a unit in either fighter to win by split decision here. But I'm expecting it's Angela Hill to once again get her hand raised. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for UFC Vegas 73. Dern versus Hill this Saturday. And I've got a lot of moneyline bets that I pointed out already. I'll be looking to add maybe a few props as they come out if anything catches my eye. But like I said, join me Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central Time this week with my guys Tommy and Anthony from On The Line Podcast. We'll be going over the card in more detail. It should be a fun time. Those guys are very funny, very entertaining, and very smart as well. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. Again, if you need a new sports book, check out Bet Online and sign up through my affiliate link in the description below. I'll catch you guys next time. Cheers.